Hello, and welcome back to the watching brief for the month of October 2020. And it has been a heck of a month. In fact, this month is going to be an unusual watching brief in so much as my wonderful co-host Andy Brockman and I. Good afternoon, Mr. Brockman.
Hello, Mark. Hi.
Hello, hello.
And
Uh,
hello, viewer.
Hello, viewer. We have managed to construct a watching brief which is free of the preamble that we've previously had in the past few months. It's a remarkable feat. We've got four pure segments of archaeological news to talk about. And in that sense, our watching brief continues our ongoing mission to distill the archaeological news of the day into a conversation for you guys to consider and hopefully continue in the comments below. And before we dive into the first of our stories for the month, I just want to highlight this month's link of the month. It's based on a talk that my lovely wife and I we watched from Jesus College, Oxford. Rather so, the talk was there. We were here, and on Zoom, the author of an upcoming book called The Paper Chase, the printer, the Spymaster, and the Hunt for the Rebel Pamphleteers by Joseph Hone, um, was presenting on the notion of printing in the early 18th century and the intrigue that surrounded the ability to publish, for example, essays about the church and its role in society, but anonymously. The idea of anonymous posts. Uh, doesn't that sound familiar? Oddly enough,
Just a little bit.
yeah. And the power that this sort of publishing had at that time. So it looks like a very interesting book. It was a very interesting talk, and at some point in the very near future, it should be available on the Jesus College YouTube channel. So check it out if you are remotely inclined. Um,
Can I just pitch in there just very briefly, Mark?
uh-huh.
Because before this turns into a preamble, but I haven't had a chance to look at the detail yet of it, and the talk obviously isn't yet up on the YouTube channel.
Hmm.
But just the synopsis here is absolutely fascinating. It has so many resonances with today and the way people use social media and abuse social media with
Mm,
anonymous posts and accusations and flaming people and so on.
mm,
And it's set in the early 1700s. The principal incident is 1705,
hmm.
and I think it's almost like a flyover period of British history. When you flip between the English Civil War and Charles II and Nell Gwyn and the Victorians,
Yeah,
maybe taking in the Prince Regent on the way.
yeah.
And in fact, it's the making of the modern English state. We have the Act of Union and the parcel of rogues who sold Scotland to Westminster.
Hmm.
Um, and culturally, it's full of, Daniel Defoe writes one of the first historical novels in the Journal of Plague Year. And the theatre is so vibrant and so engaged with the politics of the time, and with satirical works like the Beggar's Opera, John Gay's Beggar's Opera,
Mm,
which basically depicts government as a bunch of highwaymen.
hmm.
That the government of the day introduced theatrical censorship, which lasted down into the 1960s.
Mm.
So it's a crucially important part of our genuine national story, and I really recommend people to follow this up. It's a fascinating. It sounds absolutely fascinating and really important piece of work.
Absolutely. I suppose what I would add then, since we are doing a mini little preamble then against our inclinations,
Yeah.
um, is it was interesting as well because he was very active on Twitter in follow-up. So I asked him a question about whether or not print houses that were printing anonymously would have a special typeset that they kept. And also, presumably, would have to keep pristine because if you had a defect on the letter P, for example, that would mark you out as also having printed that pamphlet and that pamphlet and
Yeah.
that pamphlet. And he was saying that there was an element of that, of sort of forensic detail examination of documents. And actually, that's also part of his job is looking at the way typesets are used, the way that ornaments are used. There was a particular fleur de lis that turns up in some of the pamphlets that he was talking about. So it's real detective work and it's very compelling in that sense. And also actually something to bear in mind is that these sorts of the power of the pamphlet was still ongoing even 50, 60, 70 years later when we turn up in For example, in the colonies in the US, we recently watched Hamilton, for example, and
Yeah.
there's a very powerful pamphlet that turns up in that play. So
And
it's
the whole thing is based on Tom Paine's Rights of Man,
yeah, mm,
and his other works,
yeah,
Common Sense, and so on, which at the time are actually illegal in Britain.
yeah,
You can
precisely,
be
yeah,
in prison for owning a copy of Tom Paine's Rights of Man,
yeah,
and so
mm,
this is really powerful stuff.
exactly, yeah, yeah, yeah. Pamphleteering, fascinating stuff. So well worth checking out.
Mm.